Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So, for the last 24 hours, there have been reported continued airstrikes by Russian forces, along with reported cruise missile strikes against various targets inside of Ukraine. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense is reporting at least 38 Russian aircraft strikes, fixed-wing aircraft strikes against Ukrainian targets along the front line and behind the Ukrainian front line. A lot of these ongoing Russian sorties, airstrikes are happening south of Orikhiv and other areas just south of Zaporizhia. As we have seen, at first, a rather unsuccessful Ukrainian offensive operation taking place near Staromayorsky, and the Ukrainians seem to have flexed their operations further to the west, south of Orikhiv. They continue to try to expand this salient near Robatna. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I have yet to hear the actual official name of this very, very small, insignificant hovel of homes that exist in this small town. And it's not even a town. It's more of a village that happens to fall very close to the main line of contact. Obviously, further to the southeast, if we measure in terms of the area currently where the Ukrainians are operating and then the Russians are operating, this gray zone, to the ultimate target, which would be Tokmak, the Ukrainians are 21 kilometers from Tokmak. And if we look at the defensive lines, you can see very, very rough fighting ahead for the Ukrainians. This southeastern quadrant, the Ukrainians appear to have or are currently continuing to fight for this area of fortifications of Russian strongpoints in this locale. Now, obviously, further to the south and southwest, and then a little bit to the south western quadrant, again, some of these forward observation posts that the Russians had set up have been overrun by Ukrainian forces or are contested at this point. As you can see, most of this area is in the gray zone. Even this pro-Ukrainian site that I used to show on the map here has not declared that these trench works are under the control of the Ukrainian military. Obviously, the forward operating posts in some of these areas, the forward observation areas that were manned by Russian forces are reportedly now under the control of Ukrainian forces in this area. And if we look at the maximum distance that this salient, at least the depth of this salient, let's have a look at it. And let's try to put this into perspective, because I think when people in the West hear General Milley talk about, well, the Ukrainians have achieved a breakthrough, they believe that may be something much bigger than what the realities are on the ground. So let's measure. Let's have a look at what the depth of this salient actually is. So it's 8.47 kilometers. 8 kilometers. And you can do the math, obviously, in terms of how many miles that is. And again, ultimately, still outside of the main first line of Russian fortification. Obviously, there are secondary and then even third lines of fortifications, even before they get to the main defensive line near Tokmak. So difficult push for Ukrainian forces. Compounding that, again, the Russians have been focusing more on the deployment of heavy artillery, and then air-to-ground strikes are continuing through the use of Su-25s, Su-34s, and other ground attack aircraft are being used against Ukrainian forces, not to mention even the Lancet drones that are continuing to be used. And we're seeing those systems being used more and more and more as Russia ramps up production of the varieties of Lancet drones that are being used, and other systems as well. So again, it looks like the Ukrainians have again flexed from Staromayorsky, just south of Orikhiv, and they're attempting some sort of breakthrough in this area. And again, it's very, very tough going. Apparently, the casualties that the Ukrainians suffered near Staromayorsky and south near Zherzhin were absolutely appalling. Entire units of Ukrainian companies have been annihilated off the battlefield. And now, again, yeah, Russia has taken casualties as well, but given that the Ukrainians are on the offensive against very well prepared Russian defensive lines, and again, you can see just how far that this offensive made it in near Russian lines. If we measure from Staromayorsky south towards the main Russian defensive line, it's 12 kilometers. So they still have a significant ways to go if they continue offensive operations near Staromayorsky. But it doesn't look like that is going to continue given the losses that the Ukrainians have taken. Further to the again to the west, this looks like to be the main effort in terms of a Ukrainian push towards Tokmak. But again, it's tough going, and the Ukrainians again are taking lots of casualties in this fight. Vastly more casualties are being reported than the Russians. Again, the Russians are not on the offensive here. The Russians have very well prepared defensive lines as these Ukrainian units attempt to push south. And then ultimately, as they extend the salient and they don't increase the width of the salient, then what's going to happen? We know the Russians are bringing in elite airborne formations and tank units, more experienced tank units to fight these Ukrainian forces and possibly counterattack against this salient as well. We don't anticipate this is going to be a successful outcome for the Ukrainians. And I have a feeling, I believe, that ultimately this southern Zaporizhia offensive is going to be quite possibly the catalyst for what could end the war. Meaning the Ukrainians are taking so many casualties in this southern sector that the political leadership in Kiev, and especially the civil population of Ukraine, may start to ask questions. Is this possible? Is it possible for the Ukrainian military to retake control of the Crimean Peninsula, much less just even make it to Tokmak? And given the casualties, and look, I get it. If you are a sympathizer of the Ukrainian cause, this is not what you want to hear. And I empathize with you. I get it. And if you then call me a Russian supporter, fine. I understand it. But I'm bringing you the truth. And the truth is painful. And it's definitely not what Mark Milley is saying in terms of, hey, they penetrated the main Russian defensive belt. It hasn't happened. And then if they did make it to the main defensive belt, what next? And then ultimately, the Ukrainians don't have an air force, and the Russians do. So not a good time in this area, I imagine. I imagine it's very difficult to be a Ukrainian service member operating in this area, just as it is to be a Russian service member operating in this war, too. Very, very bloody conflict with casualties on both sides. Now, we have heard within the past 24 hours or so that Ukrainian Special Operations Forces or Intelligence Service operational forces have conducted a strike using possibly quadcopter drones against the main airbase located here to the east of Kursk. It is reported, at least the Ukrainian side is reporting, that they destroyed a number of Russian aircraft, possibly 2 Su-30s and 1 upgraded MiG-29. Now, we can't confirm that. We have not confirmed that yet, but that is what the Ukrainian side is reporting. But again, we have not been able to confirm that yet. We continue to see the Russian military expand its combat capability. I talked about over the last few days that it is believed that the Russian military is expanding by about 20 to 22,000 personnel per month. That's how many Russian service members are being either conscripted or volunteering into the Russian military. We've received information that it's actually much higher than that. That it's highly probable that the Russians are recruiting and or conscripting over 30,000 personnel per month. So you do the math, and just in terms of how the Russian military will continue to expand and grow. And then the question is given the rapid amounts of fighting age males that have fled Ukraine. I mean, we have seen YouTube content providers that were perfectly healthy males that even had advanced skills in terms of flying planes have fled Ukraine to attempt to avoid draft service, and obviously are now living a very comfortable life in Switzerland or Germany, discussing the conflict, which I find ironic, and I have to wonder, if that person or persons ever go back to Ukraine while other men died in his stead, how is he going to be accepted? Well, I don't know. I know I wouldn't leave my country and wouldn't be making YouTube videos if this was happening here in the United States. But anyway, I'm getting off track here. But again, that's kind of where we set right now. We are going to continue to monitor and watch the situation. Again, there's continuing fighting near Kupiansk or to the east of Kupiansk as Russians continue with a moderate-sized offensive in this area as well. And then again, we will continue to watch what is happening in the south, especially just south of Orikhiv, as the Ukrainians continue to try and press this offensive operation near Robatna as well. So again, thanks for joining us today. More to come very, very soon. And as always, have a good day.